Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
We still don't have a tagline.
We're brothers and we play classic games. That's what we do.
Brothers that play classic games, or I think, yeah. All right. Anyway, before we begin the episode, we just wanted to reach out to a fellow podcast, a podcast called Couch Grouches, who earlier in December gave us a shout out without even asking us if we wanted to shout out, which was really nice. So Couch Grouches is a podcast about all things nerdy and geeky. They do some deep dives onto all sorts of things, and it's three grouches sitting on a couch, and
nice.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I enjoy the podcast, and if you like our podcast, maybe you'll like their podcast too. They've been what?
I was just gonna say, where can you find them? Can you find them on the same stuff that we're on?
Yes, they're on the same stuff that we're on, Spotify and all those Google podcasts and all those guys, right? And they I actually listen to them on Podcast Addict, actually. So yes, the Couch Grouches. They are great. I enjoy them. They have a lot more episodes than we do. They have been at it for a little bit while longer. So if you need a big backlog to listen to, they've got 80-something episodes. And their episodes are a little longer form, so they run about an hour to 2.
Cool. Well, yeah. Shout out to Couch Grouches, and thank you guys for shouting us out. It was very nice of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, we may have one of them on our show eventually, but not today.
Okay. Just teasing.
It's just teasing. So, Zach,
yes.
What have you been playing recently?
Well, I think last week I mentioned I was playing some Battlefront 2, and I'm still playing some Battlefront 2, but this time I'm actually redoing the story mode of the DLC, which takes place in the First Order New Trilogy era. So I just started doing that last night. Fairly straightforward story mode, but I've just been on a Star Wars kick lately, thanks to the new movie.
So in all the time between episodes, you haven't played any other games?
I really haven't, but I am going to aim to play another game for the next one.
Good. Yeah, so so you're just progressing farther in the game, as it were?
Yeah, just, retracing steps I've already taken, because I'm just replaying the campaign of the game.
I gotcha.
Which is fun. I mean, it plays very similarly to the multiplayer, except it's AI as opposed to other players. But it's a solid storyline to go through.
Yeah, so you would recommend the Battlefront 2, which also had controversy. Yeah,
so it actually has. I was actually listening to a video today about some of the changes they've made since the controversy. And EA has really gone above and beyond to try to fix a lot of their issues. Not that I'm, defending EA, but Battlefront 2 today is a very different game than it was when it came out a while back.
I think I just played the demo when it came out originally.
Yeah, and there was a lot of problems with the game when it came out in terms of loot boxes and just unbalanced players. They pretty much stripped out the loot box mechanic. You can still technically get them, but it's not like the same type of... it won't unbalance players anymore.
It's all cosmetics, right? Like
it's
Darth
pretty much
Vader
all
and
cosmetics.
Like
and they're actually... Oh, sorry.
Like Pimp Kane, Darth Vader.
Yes, yeah. Well, and they're also releasing a DLC. It's like $25 if you already own a copy of Battlefront, but it will give you all the cosmetics without having to worry about using the loot box mechanics anyway.
That's fun.
Yeah, so you can pretty much
Any-
just make your game the way you want it to. And
Just
if
by
that
paying a little bit more.
yeah, and if you don't like, I don't necessarily care about the cosmetics. So if you're like me, I'm just gonna keep playing the game that I paid for. So
Any Baby Yoda?
no Baby Yoda yet.
Oh, keep your eye out. Apparently, The Sims dropped the Baby Yoda in
Yes, I did see that.
Sims 4, which just had the University expansion pack come out.
I do believe that someone modded Baby Yoda into the game, but it's not official.
It's not official Maxis stuff? I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't click the link.
No. The Sims one is official, I think, but someone modded it into Battlefront.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not official yet.
So I've recently been playing a different game than I have been recently playing in our other podcasts. So I like to talk about different games. So I've recently been playing 2 Point Hospital, even though you didn't ask me what I've been playing recently.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for telling me.
You're welcome. I thought you might want to know.
Yeah.
2 Point Hospital is a game it's a spiritual successor to Hospital Tycoon, where you run a hospital. It's a strategic simulation type game, similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon, except without theme parks, I guess. Though it's interesting, it's actually like more of a labor management type game.
Okay.
So in the hospital, you have to hire different staff, and you have to build out different offices, and different offices may have more of a different specialty. So you may need an office for like a psychiatrist, and that they can cure a specific sort of illness track and different illnesses, and you have to develop and learn how to cure different illnesses.
Okay.
But they have also like all of their diseases are just funny. So like one of the diseases is like pan in the hand or something like that, and they're just people who have pans stuck in them. So they need them to be extracted using a giant magnet, and you have to build the magnet room. There's also like a celebrity syndrome, so they come in and they act like Elvis, and they need to go see a psychiatrist to be un-Elvisized. Elvis the singer. So then, and you have to build up, and you can buy more different plots, and you have to have like a good ratio of doctors and all the different staff, nurses, receptionists, and janitors, and they all need to be able to have the ability to keep the workflow going while managing like breaks and stuff like that. So, and when somebody takes breaks, they take breaks for days. So they may go on a break for 30 days, and if you only have one receptionist and they're on break for 30 days, your hospital shuts down because there's a backlog of people who can't get to see anybody because you need a receptionist to assign them to the appropriate doctor. And then you may need like a GP who then decides whether or not they need additional, like a general practice doctor, who then decides what specialty they may need. And it goes from there.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And so, yeah, it's a fun simulation strategy game. 2 Point Hospital, very much a fun tongue-in-cheek type game.
Is it by the original people who made the classic game? Okay, so it's kind of in the same vein as like Planet Coaster, Planet Zoo.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
Yeah. I was gonna look it up real quick. So.
Oh, okay.
All right, thanks. That's the new looking it up music.
Yeah.
We'll see if everybody likes it or not. Probably not.
Well,
I did find it. Yeah. Well, I can't. Both. So spoiler alert to our fans. We both have very mechanical keyboards, so Zachary and I can't actually type while we're doing the podcast because you will hear it, and it's kind of obnoxious.
Yeah.
It is actually done by 2 Point Studios.
Oh, okay.
Hence the name 2 Point Hospital.
Oh, okay. Cool. That makes sense.
They were published by our friends over at Sega.
Ah, cool.
So,
Nice. Of Sonic the Hedgehog fame.
Of Sonic the Hedgehog fame, now owned by Nintendo.
They're third party. They don't really. No one owns
that's third
Sega.
party. Nobody owns Sega.
That's right. which is why they went out of business, because no one.
They got
owns
better.
Sega. Yes,
Did
they did get better. Yes, they did get better. Well, they learned how to manage their time.
So last week we talked about Half-Life, and we went on a little tangent and said when we were talking about Half-Life Alyx, and we also mentioned Half-Life. I think we talked about it in episode 0 where... Oh, no, maybe we were talking about that separately. Maybe we should talk about that today, about why you like Half-Life so much.
Oh, yes. Yeah. My own personal history with Half-Life.
Yeah, well, before... Maybe... So, if for our people who don't listen, Half-Life's one of the flagship games done by Valve, which is Valve Corporation. They created the Steam platform. They're an interesting company in their own right. I think we hinted to that. And what I mean by that is that they are a flat organization company, and they're privately held. And they've never really taken out any... They don't own anybody. They kind of own themselves. And there is Gabe, who started the company, and then everybody else. And they're all equal playing field. And
yes.
So it's a very interesting structure.
So for brief history, Gabe Newell, who was the founder of Valve, got to start working for Microsoft, and one of his early projects that he took on as a personal project was porting Doom to Windows 98 or to Windows, as opposed to being on DOS, and he pretty much used the kind of energy that he got from that to go on and find Valve Studios. So yeah, and Half-Life was their first really commercial game. It was also one of the first commercial successes from them. It did very well. It came out in 1998. I didn't get to play it until I was a little older. And my personal history with Half-Life is I played a lot of PC games on my stepfather's computer, and the computer, while good at the time, couldn't run a lot of modern games, so I opted to purchase a game from 1998. It was one of the only games I purchased, and I played a lot of it. So Half-Life probably takes about, if you play it straight through, it's going to take you, and you don't try to speed run it, it'll probably take you maybe 7-8 hours, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I put in about 80 of replaying the game about 4 or 5 times and exploring every nook or cranny of that game.
10 times.
Yes.
80 hours is a lot of time to dedicate. I think I played, in 80 hours, I played 2 full run-throughs of Baldur's Gate 2 for the PC, which is a 40-hour video game.
Yes. I would...
Or you played maybe 10 of Half-Life.
Yes. And I would like to say that Half-Life is not a game that has alternate endings. It does not really have replayable value to it, besides, really, if you play Half-Life once, you have played Half-Life. There is no more to get. But it is a very fun first-person shooter. It was essentially designed by Valve as a kind of answer to Quake and Doom, which were popular at the time. Gabe specifically wanted an immersive game rather than what he called a shooting gallery style game. He wanted a game that had a lot of visual kind of effects and stuff like that, and a lot of kind of good spectacle to it. But he also wanted a game that had a storyline that was complementary to the gameplay. And I think he was able to kind of succeed with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the game that Valve put together, and wasn't it also partly something because they had the grav cannon in it? Wasn't it part of the physics in the? No, that wasn't until
Half-Life 2.
Right. That was like a physics thing.
But they were playing around with a lot of new techniques. Pretty much they took the Quake engine and heavily modified it after getting it licensed from id Software. And their modified version became what was known as the Gold Source engine, which went on to evolve into what became the Source engine. Which,
the Source engine,
yes,
which is the backbone of a lot of their orange box material.
It remains the backbone to a lot of their material.
Yeah, and the other games that were kind of out in that time period of Half-Life was like Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike 1.6, and Team Fortress came around during that time. So some were fan mods created using the engine, because Valve is very open with their materials. So you can actually get, even today, I believe you can get Source mod. Like, you can get Source, the Source engine for Source, and make your own game using their mods.
Yeah, they have always been open to fan games, and they've often gotten into deals with fan game creators or fan mod creators, notably, as Seth mentioned, Counter-Strike, but also Day of Defeat, and more recently Black Mesa, which is a remake of the original Half-Life done in the Source engine, that started out as a free mod but now is a fully independent game available on Steam.
Oh yeah, and they're good with, in regards to, I think some people who actually worked on different fan mods have probably gotten jobs at Valve.
Oh yes,
I'm sure that's happened.
Yeah, and Half-Life has had also a couple of official spin-offs. There was in '99 there was Opposing Force, where you played as a soldier named Adrian Shepard, who has never been seen again. It's pretty much more of the same with the original Half-Life, except you had a couple cooler weapons. I think they gave you a Desert Eagle and a heavy machine gun. And then there was Blue Shift, which came out in 2001.
Yeah, and you played as Barney, right?
Yes, you played as Barney Calhoun, who reappears again in Half-Life 2. Initially, Blue Shift was supposed to only be for the Dreamcast version of Half-Life, the port, but that was canceled. So they decided they were just going to release it as a standalone PC game. It is very short. It is like half the normal length of Half-Life. And it doesn't even have the full roster of weapons and such. Most people call it like. Some people will say it's like Half-Life, but shorter and worse. But Blue Shift was cool in the sense that it also provided the high definition pack, which came with it, which boosted the polygon count for the original Half-Life models, and that was compatible for both Half-Life and Opposing Force, so that you can make the game look just a little bit better than the original graphics allowed.
Yeah. Do we want to get into kind of like what the premise of the game was? And kind of goes through like at least. So I think I booted up Blue Shift once. I don't know if I played much of it. I don't know if I even played any of Opposing Force. Mm-hmm. I came into Half-Life after I had already played Counter-Strike and Day of Defeat. So, like, I was coming back into Half-Life, and I never played it really before, playing a lot of Counter-Strike and Day of Defeat, and then picking up Half-Life, being like, oh, this is actually really good. And I think, actually, Half-Life 2 came out shortly after I started. I think I beat Half-Life, and then I think it was very soon that Half-Life 2 came out, because I took so long to play it originally.
Yeah, I mean, so Half-Life is a fairly straightforward plot in the sense that it's the story of a theoretical physicist named Gordon Freeman, who is late to work one day, something he is chronically known for, apparently.
Whoa. Oh, just like Gage Blackwood.
Yes, exactly. Just like Journeyman himself.
So all these horrible situations happen because bureaucrats are late to work.
Yeah, pretty much. Gordon shows up late for his job at the Black Mesa Research Facility, and his job is to push a metal thing into a thing called a spectrometer, which looks like a giant bolt of lightning. And he pushes it in as his bosses tell him to do, and everything goes wrong. He opens up a portal to a place called Xen, Xen, and unleashes all the monsters into the Black Mesa facility. So then is your job as Gordon to leave the Black Mesa facility because you don't want to die. Some people describe it as there's a one level designer, Ken Birdwell, who described it as Die Hard meets Evil Dead, which I think is a very accurate description.
Die Hard, so a Christmas game.
Not quite, but in the sense that you do a lot of traversing through air ducts, and you're in a kind of very industrial office space environment for a good chunk of the game before you actually go to the Xen homeworld. And then opposing force, as I mentioned, you play as Adrian Shepard, who is a soldier that comes in to deal with the Black Mesa issue, and then you have then Blue Shift is you play as a security guard who is just caught up in the whole situation of the Black Mesa issue. So they all take place. All three of those games take place at the same time. There's actually a moment where you're playing as Barney and you see Gordon going past in the morning on his commute. And there's another moment where you're Adrian Shepard and you see someone carrying Gordon's body after he gets knocked out to a different part of the game. So all of the characters kind of interact with each other indirectly, which is a nice little touch.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that kind of interconnectivity of between games. Almost like you're playing different perspectives of the same situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Just through different games.
Yeah, and in opposing force even more so, because the military is kind of the enemy in Half-Life 1. They start shooting you, so you have to shoot them. And in opposing force, you play as the military, so it's kind of a little twist on the roles of you kind of seeing it from a different perspective.
Now, both of these games are available on Steam for $5 a piece.
Yes.
And is Half-Life? I think Half-Life might be also.
I think Half-Life might be
that price too.
So yeah, Half-Life is $10 right now, and the other games are $5. I definitely think it's worth picking up if you've never played the Half-Life games. If you're interested in first-person shooters, if you like classic first-person shooters, especially like Quake and Doom, which I do, and I enjoy Half-Life for a lot of the subversions to the genre that it brought out. It was very unique for the time. I mean, it's not like a run and gun like Doom and Quake are. It's a lot more trying to, like, you have to conserve your ammo.
It's tactic driven. It's
tactic
also
driven.
Yeah. I think if you get shot, you die pretty easy.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways to kind of boost up your health and your armor, but once you start losing your armor, you're going to take a lot of damage pretty quick. So it definitely ups the ante in terms of you don't necessarily feel like a bullet sponge of a character like you might as the Doom guy.
Yeah, I think they're I think all of them together, the Half-Life, that original Valve box, as it were, was a pretty good collection of games that really, if you see those pictures of like LAN parties with like the kids taped to the like ceiling and stuff like that, that's what happened. Like that's like Counter-Strike 1.6 right there. Like I remember going to a video game cafe and sitting down and playing Counter-Strike with a couple of my friends and a bunch of people that I didn't even know, and we got into a local match. And then so after Half-Life came Half-Life 2.
Yes, kind of a substantial amount of time later. So the original Half-Life came out in 98. Half-Life 2 came out in 2004.
Right.
And Half-Life 2 takes place pretty much following up from where Half-Life 1 ends. So, spoiler alert for Half-Life 1, it ends with Gordon being put into a stasis field of some sort. And in Half-Life 2, you awaken sometime later and find out that the world has been taken over by this alien race known as the Combine. And now Gordon has to kind of deal with that situation. And you run across former Black Mesa characters. So you run across Barney. You run across a scientist named Dr. Eli Vance and his daughter Alex, who's going to be the central character in Half-Life Alyx. And you run across Dr. Kleiner, who's a kind of stereotypical like nerdy scientist guy.
Yes, yeah, Kleiner had glasses, didn't he? Or
yeah, he has glasses and a pet monster head crab. They're called that has been debeaked, and it's named Lamar.
That's right.
And Half-Life 2, as Seth mentioned earlier, also introduced us to a new physics engine, which was the Source engine, and a way that they wanted to introduce people to that engine and give it kind of the gravitas that they thought it deserved was by giving you a weapon called the gravity gun, which allowed you to pick up objects and chuck them. And different objects have kind of different weight to them, and they'll be chucked at different speeds. So it kind of gives each... it very much makes the physics engine feel as real as it could have been at that time.
Yeah, and they also use... So that was eventually released in an orange box, which was packaged with Team Fortress 2 and Portal 1.
Yes. Along with the two episodic follow-ups to Half-Life 2, Episode 1 and Episode 2.
Yes, that was eventually all packaged together as a deal.
Yeah.
Which I think is still a deal that happens. That's their orange box. That's like their flagship games. Team Fortress 2 with all of its hats. Half-Life 2, and then Episode 1 and Episode 2 that followed up after Half-Life 2, but are not Half-Life 3.
Nope.
And then those also take place more... Do you play as Alex in some of those?
No. I mean, she has a bigger role in them.
She has a bigger role in those. Yeah.
They also take place, like, I think Half-Life 1, Episode 1... Half-Life 2, Episode 1 takes place, like, a few hours after Half-Life 2 happens.
Right.
And then Half-Life Episode 2, I think, takes place pretty much immediately after Half-Life Episode 1.
Yes. Yeah.
And they introduce some new characters, some new enemies, and some other different features in the game that kind of up the ante of the original.
And Alex will be taking place before the episodes.
Yes, Alex, I believe, takes place actually before Half-Life 2 itself. So before Gordon is brought out of stasis.
Right.
And it's just Alex's time in City 17, the place that's been is kind of most of the game takes place.
So perhaps the taking over of the Combines is probably what we're going to be seeing in Half-Life Alyx.
Yeah, or at least kind of the early days of the Combine to kind of take over in their regime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lore to Half-Life that, I mean, it even ties into Portal a little bit. So it's definitely one of those games that a lot of the lore is given to you through characters in the game talking, not necessarily even to you. You'll hear characters talking to each other in the background, and that's how you can pick up little tiny pieces of lore. And the game does a good job at that, at using kind of diegetic sound to kind of build this world that you're in.
That's a good what was that word, diegetic?
Yes, that was a filmmaking class word I learned.
Oh yes. So what exactly is diegetic?
Diegetic means it's a sound within the item, within the thing that you're listening to or watching. So, for example, if you're watching a movie and there's a song in the movie that the characters hear that is diegetic music, as opposed to being a soundtrack item.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Or like a conversation that's happening that someone overhears.
Yeah, at least for...
Or you as a user overhear.
Yeah, so at least in the sense that I'm using it, in Half-Life, the Half-Life 2, the conversations you hear, and actually some of them, some of the music you hear tends to be more diegetic. Like some of the music isn't really music; it's just like the alarm blaring, but it blares at a certain beat, so it kind of sounds like music. And it has that kind of. It gives you kind of a daunting environment that you're in, a very Orwellian environment.
Orwellian. That's
I got the vocab today.
I know, very good vocab. Oh no, the Orwellian reminds me of Beyond Orwell. It also there's a game called the Orwell, which is it's also an interesting type of game. Yeah, so Half-Life 2, and then Counter-Strike Source. Portal's good.
Yep, and Portal, which again, arguably, as some people like to say, will take place in the same universe. There's hints between the two, especially Portal 2. There's references.
Aperture Labs and Black Mesa.
Black Mesa, yeah. A lot of competitiveness going on between them. There's a reference in Portal 2 to the Borealis, which is the ship you hear about in Half-Life 2.
Right.
So they're implied to take place in the same universe.
Yeah, there's also comments about how Aperture Science does better at science than Black Mesa.
Yes,
Portal.
Which is arguable. Aperture Science definitely doesn't have as many staff as Black Mesa does.
That's true. But they're very more efficient that way.
But also Black Mesa, at the end of Half-Life, becomes a smoldering crater in the ground. So
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. So they also don't have a very big staff.
Yeah. Counter-Strike is a multiplayer only game. If you don't know about Counter-Strike,
along with Counter-Strike Source and Team Fortress and
Team Fortress 2
and Team Fortress 2 and
Ricochet
and Ricochet. And Dota 2 is built on the Source engine, isn't it?
I believe that Dota 2 is part of the Source engine.
So
and also multiplayer only as well.
Yeah.
So they have a little spread. You either get. It's interesting that they either have single player games or multiplayer games with Valve. You don't have any real game that is single player and also multiplayer.
Yeah, I think the only exception to that is Portal 2, which has a co-op mode. And I guess arguably, yes, and Gary's mod, and arguably Half-Life Decay, which was a PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life that was co-op as well.
I didn't even know that game existed.
Yes, yeah. So Half-Life Decay was so if you buy Half-Life 1 on PlayStation 2, it comes with Half-Life 1, and it also comes with a game called Decay, which is a short expansion to Half-Life 1 along the lines of Opposing Force and Blue Shift, except it is a co-op version of Half-Life 1. You play as these two other theoretical physicists that I guess work alongside Gordon.
Do they have names?
Yes, Colette Green and Gina Cross. You actually hear their names in Half-Life 1 being called over the intercom system.
Oh, interesting. You've played a lot of Half-Life.
I've played more Half-Life than I've needed to play, that's for sure.
Have you ever booted it up for nostalgic's sake?
Yes. Every now and then I want to experience certain levels of Half-Life, so I open up one of my old saves, which has pretty much the whole game completed, so I can just pick whichever level I want to play through.
Nice. It's kind of like Hitman in that mission with the Hitman Blood Money with the house. It's always a fun mission to play through.
Yeah, and there's certain levels that are certainly fun to play again in Half-Life. Probably after we finish this podcast episode, I'm probably going to play more Half-Life. So to be honest,
on hour 200.
Yes.
Yeah, that's I guess that's going to be Half-Life there. And some of the Valve catalog and a little bit on Valve. I think that's good for today. I feel like we have more. As always, I always feel like there's more to go back and talk to about certain things. So maybe we'll revisit Valve and their catalog again when when Half-Life Alyx comes out.
Yeah, and there's definitely places we'll probably talk about other Valve games. I mean, if we do an episode talking about Warcraft, we'll probably bring up Dota, and that will lead us to Dota too. Yes. So
Warcraft.
Yes, that's one for the books. But again, I definitely recommend Half-Life, the first game for sure, and I also recommend Half-Life 2 as as a sequel.
Right. Yeah, and maybe kind of like Deus Ex and Deus Ex, the new one.
Oh yes, Human Revolution.
Human Revolution. Yeah, I almost feel like you should play. Well, we could talk about Deus Ex another time, but I would recommend playing Half-Life 1 before you play Half-Life 2, not only for the story, but for it's sometimes hard going back to older graphics when you played a game at newer graphics kind of thing.
Yes.
Or like a newer UI. It's kind of like Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 1. It's very hard for me to go back to Mass Effect 1 knowing that there's a Mass Effect 2.
Yes, and Half-Life 1, it doesn't do good. I mean, if graphics is a thing, I recommend playing Black Mesa, which is a port of Half-Life 1 done in the same graphical engine as Half-Life 2. And it is very, very true to the original game. Currently, it is not 100% complete, but they did release the open beta for the last third of the game that was missing. So
awesome. So with that, let's just roll into our buy wait pass segment. Unless there's anything you wanted to say further.
I got nothing on Half-Life.
All right. So, yeah. Well, So let's move along here, and so we'll go to our buy wait pass segment, and we have games that are coming out. I asked you first what games you've been played recently. So, Zach, what game do you have that's upcoming that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, I was bashing on it on the franchise just a moment ago, but I'm very excited for Doom Eternal. It is the follow-up to the 2016 Doom game released by Bethesda Software and id. I really liked Doom. I purchased it when it came out. And I will probably do the same with Doom Eternal, so I think it's going to be a buy for me. It looks like just a very cathartic game to play, as Doom tends to be. I'm also excited about the prospect that if you pre-order the game now, you get a copy of Doom 64 as a port to the PC, which is the first time that they've done that. So that's
the N64 game, right?
Yeah. So it's the first official port of Doom 64 to the PC, or to the PS4, or to whatever console that you want to buy Doom Eternal on.
Perhaps when is Doom Eternal coming out?
Sometime in 2020. I believe February. I would have to double check, but I don't want to make clicky noises on my keyboard.
Yes,
but it does look like it's going to be a promising game. I believe that there's some signs in the trailer that you might have to fight God, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh, interesting. And maybe we will talk about Doom has a bit of a history when it comes to video games, so maybe when the Doom Eternal comes out, you can expect a related Doom podcast in your feed, and we can talk about all the Dooms. Doom was one of the first games that I played, so it's something that's close to my heart.
And Chex Quest was one of the first that I played.
Oh, Chex Quest is an amazing game. One of the few and far between games that was distributed solely in cereal boxes.
It's true.
For my
what are you excited for, Seth? What game are you looking for?
My buy wait pass today is going to be a game called Firmament. It's an adventure game that's going to be done by the studio of Cyan Studio, which is the same people who did Myst, Riven, Abduction, Uru, Abduction being their newest one. Firmament is going to be a steampunk adventure game in the style of that is very familiar with everyone that we've gotten to know with Cyan. So very much beautiful environments, very little actual people, creepy pacing, but also not necessarily. It's also like it's creepy that you're alone, but it's kind of a fascinating world. Puzzles where you're like raising and lowering waters and bridges and kind of like physical puzzles. So I'm assuming that they're going to be very kind of right up in that alley. Very high in-depth story that you have to try to piece apart. And it'll be a VR experience. So I'm looking forward to Firmament being on VR as well as the Half-Life Alyx being on VR. I think both of those being on VR would be two solid kind of full-run games. I think I actually already bought it. I'm not sure.
So I guess you're a buy on this game.
I'm probably a buy on this game because I think I backed their Kickstarter, or okay. I at least saw them add packs, and I think I backed it then. Looks like it's going to be a July 2020 delivery date. It is somewhat. I think it's in a backer kit now. I think their Kickstarter is actually over, but I think you can still back the game if you go to like their just Google Firmament and you'll find it. And but it's saying July, but it's also a Kickstarter game, so who knows. Those I don't know if I've had a game that really shipped on time when it came to a Kickstarter.
That's kind of the curse of Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think some of the games that have come out of Kickstarter have been amazing. I just think that sometimes they just set very low expectations or very high expectations for themselves.
Yes,
where they expect to ship them very soon. With that, I just wanted to let everybody know that we are still retrieving. It sounds like we're gathering. We're still like out there like digging up emails and all of that for our podcast. I do have an ask. If you are a international listener, send us an email. We'd love to chat with you about your own experiences being not from the United States. If you're listening to us, and so we can once again we're doing the giveaway where you send us feedback and we'll put you in a drawing for a free game, and it's a free PC game, yes. And it will be from a list.
Yes.
So you will choose your own game from our list. To be honest, you might think our list is garbage, but we have a lot on it. Well, we have close to 300 games on it, so we're ready to let them go. So just send us some feedback and tell us something that you liked about the episode or you hated about the episode. Either or, we like both negative and positive feedback. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. We hopefully have gotten something out there yet.
Yes. I don't think.
By now.
We will hopefully have
on Instagram, one image. And you can follow us on Twitter. All of our social media is Classic Gaming Brothers, except for Twitter, which is
CG Brothers Pod.
CG Brothers Pod.
Yes.
We will announce new episodes on all of them. We are dropping on Sunday, generally Sunday afternoon, to allow the transmittal to all the different agents so that you can have it in your feed on Monday. And we are on most agents and in most streaming services, so feel free to find if we're on something that you're not on. If you want to listen to us on something that we're not on, let us know. We'll get on there.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother. I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right. All right. Cue the music.